where should we go to next?
Well,
Newcastle.
probably probably the cathedral. So yeah,
Palace seem to be going off quite high. They're not particularly rated. I suppose like against Man City, obviously when Zaha was out, you'd expect, what on earth can they do there? And they ended up 2-0 up after 20 minutes. But yeah, the market doesn't seem to particularly rate Palace even after all the improvements they made last year with Vieira and obviously Zaha being in the team and presumably fit for this one as well.
I think I think the general impression is that if they, Palace haven't been able to win games when they've been playing well, which is not a good sign. They've really not been able to clinch games. There's been a lot of draws. They're kind of doing what they did last year, which is not picking up the
points. Yeah,
not picking up the points, and I think it doesn't help that they've got that when you're relying on a very, very good winger in Wilf Zaha, but when you're relying on a winger to score goals, this is the Everton problem with Gordon. If you're relying on those guys, even though they are scoring, that they're scoring at a rate that you'd expect from a good winger. They need a focal point, and I don't know why Odsonne Edouard hasn't worked out there, but they've not been clinical, and I think that teams.
Certainly, I keep on going back to the first game on the Friday night against Arsenal, which could easily have finished 1-1 because Eze has a brilliant chance 1-on-1 with the keeper, gets it saved, and then Arsenal who were under pressure quite a lot at that point in the game, go up and score what was an own goal, from the Saka shot/cross.
Yes, yeah, of course.
And suddenly it's 2-0, even though Palace had been really ramping up the pressure for an equaliser, and that obviously changed the narrative for Arsenal. But it is kind of, pointing at what you're saying, that they're not brilliant at finishing teams off and winning games. Then again, they came from behind against Villa. I quite like Palace. Anyway.
I think they're a good team. I just, I think away at a Newcastle team that are very much on the up at the moment. I think they are gonna struggle. I don't think their counter-attacking ways will necessarily serve them well against Newcastle, because I think Newcastle aren't. Newcastle aren't going to they're not going to knock the ball around in the same way that City would, or even Arsenal actually. So
according again to the metrics, Newcastle are a bit short of where they should be at something like 2.2, so the lowest price it should have gone. So at 2.12, 2.14 at the moment. The value is in laying Newcastle until it reaches that 2.2, which I sort of tried to do here. But yeah, no other value on any sort of unders markets, because the market's expecting really quite a low score here. Can we see that? Yeah, it's only 10-1 for there to be a single goal in the game, or a 0-0 rather, and under 2.5 goals is odds on. So do you think that Palace might be able to keep out Newcastle? It seemed quite an attacking team, obviously. Like sort of in the Liverpool game, they kind of slowed it down and tried to shut down the game towards the end. But obviously that's the situation. But at home,
there's quite a lot of skullduggery going on, wasn't there? I don't necessarily, even as a Newcastle fan, I don't necessarily like that, but or didn't like that. Yeah. I think this has got the potential to be quite a high scoring game actually, because I think that it actually kind of reminds me a little bit of the Brentford Leeds game that's coming up as well, which is you've got two teams that I know they potentially have the ability to cancel each other out, because they both like a high intensity game and sort of hitting teams with pace and down the wings, like Zaha, Ayew. You've got sort of Sam Maximan, Almiron. I think that both teams, Newcastle started really well and they've got a great keeper, and so they kept a couple of early clean sheets. But I think there's goals in this. I think both teams will concede. So yeah, the idea of going over 2.5 or is not that worrying.
Well, yeah, I'm not back in the overs at the moment in terms of strategy, but yeah, it's quite interesting that it's just finally interesting that the market reckons this will be a low score, even though the kind of way that Newcastle are playing, particularly at home, scoring 3 against Man City, conceding plenty as well, or giving up chances. Yeah, I just think that they see Palace as this team that, shuts things down and doesn't score, like a bit like an Everton, where I think they've got a bit more about them, particularly with Zaha on the pitch. But maybe, when the team news comes in, some of those prices might change. But I don't think I'd heard that he was injured, or like I was thinking that maybe this was reflective of the chance they might sell him, on transfer deadline day. But again, it's like it's rumored every time, but never actually happens. So yeah.
He'll be there till he's 50. He'll do a Stanley Matthews and he'll never retire.
Yeah.